I'm Jordan,
And I'm Wyman.
and you're watching Speedway Pulse Media.
Hey Josh, how you doing today?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good,
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 good.
good. Well, we want to thank you for coming on. It was really exciting getting to talk to you, and that was really I was really happy to see that email come back. I kind of forgotten about it for a little bit, but it really cool to get to see that and get to have you come on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. No problem.
Yeah,
Happy to
absolutely.
help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we like to start off and ask this for everyone. What got you started in racing? What started your motorsports career?
So I have a pretty interesting background actually when it comes to kind of how I got into motorsports. I don't come from a family that was, a long line of racing drivers or that had a history with motorsports in general, which in this sport tends to be quite rare. It all started a long time ago with my dad. He started a lot of successful businesses, and after closing one of them, just like anybody, when you have money for the first time, you want to go do something with it. And
Right.
for him, it was go buy a nice car, and so he went and bought a car, and then you can't just have the nice car; you got to go learn how to drive it.
Private.
And so he took it to our home track, PIR, Portland International Raceway, and he learned how to drive it there. But he quickly realized, it's not as easy as people think it is, and he got hooked on it. And so he bought a race car. He bought a Panos GT2 car and started racing locally in SCCA.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was really my sister's kind of fifth birthday where he happened to be racing that weekend. And so, as a family, myself, my mom, and my sister went out to go support it. And I was 2 at the time. So I have no memory of this, whole scenario. But he had a friend there, Matt Crandall, that saw the birthday balloons and said, "Oh, how old is she turning?" And my dad said, "Oh, 5," and he said, "Oh, 5, it's time for karting." And we had no idea what karting was or any of that. And so he sent us to the local track in Canby, Oregon, Pat's Acres Racing Complex, which is now, it's near and dear to my heart. It's my favorite karting track I've ever raced on.
Right.
And I have millions of laps around there from since the time I was, 2 years old to now. And I don't remember it, but apparently when we got there and Jordan was giving this a try, I was pushing her out of the cart. And so the owner of the track said, "Hey, look, the track's closed on Mondays. You can take him out here and we'll teach him how to drive." And so since I was 2, I've been karting. And they started by just pushing me around and not actually starting the engine, but just teaching me how to steer first. And then they eventually fired it up and introduced the gas and brake. And I have no idea how I learned it, but somehow, when you're you just have a natural
Natural.
capacity for it. So
Right.
um, it kind of came naturally, and it's something that's now very near and dear to my family. I think what's interesting is that, despite this lack of knowledge that as a family we had in motorsports and in the general kind of ladder and way in, my family has always loved racing. So my grandma watched all the IndyCar races before I was even born and still does. And so my dad was a fan of Formula One, and so I grew up with him watching Formula One,
Oh,
even before,
wow.
before I can remember. So we've been interested in motorsports, but I'm the first kind of pioneer to actually be a driver and want to compete at a very high level.
Yeah, you bring up SCCA. That's kind of where a lot of people get their start. I've worked with SCCA. I corner marshal a lot with them, so I go around different IMSA races and stuff and do that. So that's we talk to a lot of people, and that kind of something we all have in common. We all kind of started with SCCA, and I think that's really cool.
Right. Which you're honestly the first one to not have a dad who raced to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone else that we've interviewed said
Their
my
dad.
dad started. So I went with it. That's how I was whenever I started racing. My dad started dirt go-karting. He never went anywhere big. He just stayed in the dirt go-karts. And then I did the same thing, followed suit. But then as senior year progressed in high school, I kind of ran out of time. So really I had to step away from it.
Yeah.
And I've had a little bit of shifter car experience, just minimal. I've done a few races here and there, but I understand the basic stuff, how the cart's set up and different layouts of tracks and stuff. So and it's really cool that that's where everyone starts. So we all kind of something we all have in common, whether like you, we make it to Indy NXT and stuff, but we all start all have the same starting spot, so it really works out. But you know, people first I think started really hearing about you when you made your starts in IMSA and Le Mans. You came the youngest starter to do the Rolex and Le Mans. Want to talk about maybe how those came to fruition?
Sure. So my kind of career trajectory has been a very unique one in this world, in this industry. Most drivers, what we see is a very kind of clear and concise path. If you really look at careers, a lot of the series names make it confusing, but if you really go back and look at, junior careers of drivers, it's pretty straightforward. They typically stick to, one or two things, and it's usually formula cars all the way through, or, GT cars all the way through. But my driver coach, Steven Simpson, wanted to try something a little bit different with me. And it was something that he noticed back in 2020. So I had just done my kind of leeway into cars. I was competing in the Road to Indy, which is now the USF Pro Championships.
Right.
First year, it was the COVID year. And so what I originally wanted to do was go 1600 racing that year to get some experience in a Formula car that doesn't have downforce. It doesn't have, all the fancy bells and whistles and assists. I wanted something that was going to teach me how to drive a race car before going and taking that next step into USF 2000. But I didn't have that luxury because of COVID. And so I kind of had to throw myself to the wolves in USF 2000. It was a really difficult year. I struggled a lot. And at the end of the year, we were at St. Pete because they did it at the end with all the COVID, things happening. And so we decided at the end of that year, we didn't really make any decisions, but my driver coach said, I've been working with you for a few races now, because he came on really for the final kind of 3 events of that year. And Steven said, he said, look, I've been working with you for the last couple of races. Your driving style is very unique, and it suits these prototype cars that at the time he had just, stopped driving for a living. He had been racing for JDC and IMSA. And so he was very, aware of the Orca and the chassis and what it took to drive. And he said, you've got a very unique style, but it suits these cars very well. I'd be interested to get you a test in a prototype. And I kind of brushed him off because I thought he was crazy. I was, I was 14 at the time, and just starting this kind of leeway into cars, and I thought he was completely crazy, because I've grown up watching Le Mans and watching prototype racing in general. Sports cars, even though it was never my kind of career goal or trajectory, is something that I grew up watching. Just like anybody, when you love this sport enough, you'll watch pretty much anything. So I was watching it. So I kind of brushed it aside, and we made the decision to do another year of USF 2021. But he said, I really want to get you in this car, so I'm going to organize a test day. So he organized a test with PR1 Matheson Motorsports at Buttonwillow. And I've been to Buttonwillow karting, but I'd never driven the car track there. It was a very kind of nerve-wracking test day for me, and it was kind of in the middle of my USF 2000 season. I remember, they sent me this document for the steering wheel. It was like 3 pages.
Oh, wow.
Up to this point, the USF 2000 car is very simple. It's got 6 buttons on the steering wheel. From what I remember in the USF car, one of them doesn't even work.
Oh, wow.
Very straightforward. It's just a button that literally does nothing on the wheel. And so it was like, you have these 6 buttons, and we don't really use one of them, and they're all very straightforward. It's got paddles in the back. And then I went from that to, here's a 3-page document on everything that this steering wheel will do, what all the buttons do. So I, read through it, and I remember being very nervous, but showed up to the track. Obviously, Bobby and the team, those guys were a little bit nervous, to have this young kid kind of show up. I was 15 at the time, and that's anyone's ever been in one of these cars. There's never been somebody at 15 testing a prototype like an LMP2 car. They're very nervous, but for me, my general style and the way that I go about things has always been very progressive. I'm not the driver that goes out typically and, in the first 2 laps is off the track everywhere and finds the barrier and, okay, there's the limit, let me dial it back. I'm very progressive. I go out and I slowly build to what is the potential of the car and what I have available to me. And so that's what I did. Steven said, hey, look, just do what you normally do. Go out and build and learn. And so I went out and I just slowly built into it. And every lap I got more comfortable and more used to this real, like, unbelievably powerful car. Coming from USF 2000, though, it was definitely a huge jump. You're going from a car that, the fastest will go is maybe 154 at Road America to all of a sudden this prototype that even on a short straightaway can easily surpass that. And, can hit 200 in the right scenario. So this is a super fast car. And I remember, the first run, it was almost like there's so much to get used to coming from a Formula car. When I was coming from, my whole career, I've always had my head exposed, from karting to Formula cars, I've always had wind against my head. And you don't really think about that kind of aspect of it until you're sitting in a car where you don't have that resistance on your body. Right. And when you're that fast, but there's no resistance whatsoever, nothing's pushing against you. It was actually a very strange feeling to the point where it almost was making me like get to the point of like passing out, where I'd feel very driving. because I have no resistance, but
It's-
I'm moving fast and accelerating quickly. But just that lack of resistance made it really hard on my body physically. So that first session was just getting used to that feeling. And I remember like struggling to even go full throttle for the first 3 laps because I was like, I'm gonna pass out. Like this is such a unique sensation. But then once I got into it and started building up, it just got better and better and better. And the team was impressed. They were working with me very closely, and um, I left that test, thinking nothing of it and just went about the year. And then we rolled into Barber, which I think was the second race of the year for us. It might have been the first, actually. I remember this test was pretty early on. So I think Barber was the first race of the year that year. And Zach Brown happened to be there. And, it's not every day that, Zach Brown reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I want to have a chat with you."
oh,
Right.
absolutely.
He said, I'd like you to swing by my RV and and have a chat. And so my dad and I walk over, and my dad didn't really tell me what it was about. I know that Zach had gotten in touch with him, and it was basically something that Steven had organized. And I sat down. He said, "Look, I've heard stories from this test that you did at Button Willow, and I want to take you to the Red Bull Ring in Austria and put you in United Auto Sports LMP2 car and see what you've got." And I there's zero hesitation for me to say yes. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And at this stage, it was very clear that this was turning into something more than just I want you to try this car. This is a career path option for me now. Um, and so, when the year ended and there was a lot of uncertainties for 22 with a new tub coming out for USF Pro, um, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. I went and did this test in Austria, and I just did my usual thing. It was a half day, which I've never been to the track before. I've never been to Austria before, so new track, new environment, super jet lagged, and all I got was a half a day in the car with this world class team that's competed in sports car racing for forever. And I just remember kind of building into it. The whole day, that half day is more a blur. But I did the test. I got home and didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, that was cool. Got to work with this team and these amazing people. And a few days later, there was a contract on my desk for a year of the World Endurance Championship.
About
And
that.
time I was like, there's nothing better for me to do. I don't think there's going to be any better publicity. I don't think there's going to be any better way to learn and make a name for myself than driving with two professional guys on the world stage. And so I signed it, and then along came the contract for IMSA with PR1 as well. So it was kind of a surreal year, and I'll never forget those two tests and what kind of got me into it. It's a pretty unique story and a unique scenario. And those events as a whole are just something special, to have gotten to do, the Rolex 24 from such a young age and to make history at all those events that first year. Mentally, I think the most taxing year so far for me, but also the year where I feel I learned the most. And it's been hard to translate everything that has come from that to Indy NXT. I went from, having lots of strategy and longer races, longer formats to now coming back to sprint racing where it's really only an hour and you're the only guy in the car. There's no fuel save, no tire management. There's none of that strategy aspect. There's no pit stops, and so it's a much different kind of scenario. And coming back to that into a completely new car has been a challenge. But I think that what I learned from endurance racing and the stories and memories that I gained from those 2 years on the world stage competing with all those professionals is will come in handy down the road, especially in my career. If I go to IndyCar, if I go back to sports cars, I think no matter what I do, that experience is going to be undeniably a positive one.
And would you say there were some similarities between the P2 car and running the Indy Next car?
I think like anything, there's going to be similarities, there's going to be differences. Jumping back into a Formula car in 23 when I was kind of just doing that partial year of Indy Next to get back into it was pretty surreal. It's different. It's a lot different. I had gotten so used to this prototype that I've been driving for 2 years now. And you get used to having a roof over your head. You get used to not having that wind resistance. You get used to power steering. You get used to carbon brakes and these things that make this car just an absolute unit. And I think that coming back into Indy Next, one of the glaring challenges was obviously the physicality. You're coming into a car that has no power steering, and I had been driving for 2 years a car that was assisted. And there's a big difference there in where your body is strained. The prototype sure was physical to drive. It's hot in the car. The power steering doesn't help all that much, but you've got to hold your core up. When you do endurance racing, the seat is not necessarily perfect because you got to share the car with two other guys. So you just have this
Right.
insert. You have to make compromises. You're never fully comfortable in the car. You might move around a little bit, but that's just the way it is. Um, and so, coming back to the Formula car where the seat is perfectly molded for you, there's definitely like a difference there. Similarly, they're both quite quick. They do similar lap times at a few circuits that both would run at. And so I think that speed wise, it wasn't too much of an adjustment, but it's more the general driving style and the way the car handles and feels that was so hard to get used to for me, and still has been a challenge. So, we have been working through that, and H&D Motorsports and the guys there have been super grateful, and super nice to me. They've given me lots of praise, which, at certain points during the years, I haven't felt like I deserved driving the next car. But they've still thought very highly of me and kept me here. And so I'm excited to come back for 25 and make another proper go at it.
Definitely be on an HMD. You got some of the best in Indy Next. You got some of the best teammates and crews. That's really that you can't really ask for a better team to step up with coming out. United. That's like United Autosport and Indy Next kind of combined. You got some of the world class ones there, and this year the competition is going to be really tough. And I think Indy Next, you've got some really big drivers coming back. I know like Louis Foster and some of them have graduated though, but aside from that, do you think the competition this year is going to be just as tough as last year?
Yeah, I think Indy NXT is in a really good spot right now. It's gotten a lot of publicity from the name change and going to Firestone, and not all of it has been positive. But the real positive change that it's seen has been the swing in turnouts. I think that coming from Indy Lights, that final year of Indy Lights was a poor turnout, let's say. It got better that kind of year after COVID, but it wasn't on a great trajectory until Penske took it over and it became part of the IndyCar series. I think that kind of turnaround put it in the spotlight and put it back on the map for a lot of drivers. And now we see lots of talent, coming to try their hand at that scholarship and a chance at IndyCar. We see guys coming from Europe now like Kaio and really enjoying the Indy NXT car and the environment racing in America. And I think that's, one of the big differences between Europe and America is just the environment that you compete in. I think that America is much more inviting and much more fun to compete in, especially at the junior formula level. So I like seeing these guys come over that are super talented, and I like seeing them kind of come out of their shell and fit into the American world. But I definitely think that the competition for NXT is just getting higher. We see lots of talented individuals come in, and every year it seems like, even if people are graduating, there's more talent coming in from lower categories. And for sure, it's going to be another competitive year. Lots of big names coming from different steps and different series. And I think that we're going to have another pretty solid field with lots of talent.
Do you feel as this year probably will be a bigger stepping stone? You've gotten all the feel for most of the tracks, and you think this year will be just another stepping stone, or do you think this year could be maybe a tight run for the championship, or is it going to be kind of consistency, top tens, podiums?
I think looking back at my first full year, this year and going into next, my goal is to start by, looking for consistent top 5, top 10 finishes. Something that I think I struggled with last year was consistency. There was a few races and sessions where I was quick. Indy NXT was always quick to post about them, and because I wasn't necessarily a front runner during that year, but I did have successes at certain tracks and in certain sessions. And I think it's really about finding that consistency. Before I can target, obviously I want to win. I want to win just as bad as everyone else does, if not more. But you have to start somewhere, and the first kind of key to that is finding a place where you can be consistently. And if you're consistently running in the top 7 in that series, that's a big step forward. And if you can consistently run in the top 7, then you can be in podium contention. So for me, it's just about at the start of the year taking it one step at a time. And rather than kind of getting in my own head like I did this year, taking a step back and saying, okay, let's shoot for something attainable. Let's go for top sevens here, build that confidence. And I think confidence is something that's so important in motorsports. If you set too lofty goals and you can't hit them and you start, breaking down your own confidence and your own mental, it's just going to compound and it's only going to get worse. And so I think it's about setting something that's attainable, feeling good about achieving it, and then making those smaller steps forward. So I'm really excited about what's to come. I'm looking forward to the new year and a new challenge and kind of setting that goal, and just being a consistent front runner throughout the year. That's really my main goal.
And we saw, I guess it was last year, you signed a development deal with Ed Carpenter. How has that kind of gone about? You sit in on the meetings and stuff, and they give you advice, I assume?
Yeah, so Ed and Tim have been very kind to extend a helping hand to me, and that was something that we did in 23, actually in 22, coming off my WEC season when they heard I was going to do a partial year in Indy NXT. And that was kind of a mutual, reaching out to them and them getting back to us. And it was, my dad and I trying to think of a way of, how can we make this transition easier? How can we kind of help the step towards IndyCar? And Ed and Tim were kind enough to give me lots of advice and to kind of take on this role of developing me as a driver and preparing me for IndyCar. And there's a lot that goes into it, but the main one is just me getting to interact with the team as a part of it. Getting to sit in on pre-race meetings at the track. Basically, after every Indy NXT race, I go straight to their trailer. I'm able to stand with them on the timing stand and learn about IndyCar strategy and the general kind of swing of the races. So it's a very unique situation, and one that I'm very grateful for. They've been super helpful, and so have the drivers that they have there. Renus and Christian last year or this year, giving me lots of advice, and always happy to help. And if I come there with video and I say, hey, I want you to look at this and give me your thoughts, they always help me out. So yeah, really nice people. I'm super grateful to be there and to be continuing with them. And hopefully, that they'll give me a chance in IndyCar one of these days. And that's all I can really ask for from them, is to give me that opportunity at one point. And right now they've given me all the tools to succeed. And it's just about me, putting it together and finding my way there.
You got a great mentor with them. They just signed Alexander Rossi, and I'm sure that would be a tremendous help to you. Rossi's done it all pretty much, F1. He's really made his name in IndyCar, but he's
Indy 500
yeah, Indy 500 champion. So I bet that would be a really big help to you.
Yeah, for sure. Rossi coming in is a great thing for the team. I'm excited to have another driver there to kind of bounce some ideas off of, and if I'm struggling, maybe find some help through. So yeah, I think it's a good thing for the team, and I'm excited to see him there.
Right. And another question we always like to ask is, where do you see your career going in the next 5 years down the road?
It's always difficult with motorsports to, predict where I'm going to end up or what's going to happen. I think that this is a sport that happens so quickly, and, plans can change in, what feels like the blink of an eye. Obviously, my selfish best interest would be to be an IndyCar. But, to get there is a bumpy road, and it's a tough one. And so I'm not sure, it depends on a lot of factors. How I do this year, what do I do next year if this year doesn't go the way I think it will. And so, for me, for sure, it's either going to be an IndyCar, and if that's not going to work out, then I'll see myself probably back in sports cars. I really enjoyed the endurance racing and sharing the car with other guys. I think that there was something special about those series and that scenario. So for sure, one of those series is where I see myself 5 years down the road, and it's just a matter of which one is the right fit for me.
And that kind of brought up a really interesting point there. We were going to say this year you haven't done any sports cars, but like you said, you say you might come back to sports cars. How was that test with Toyota like at the end of last year in the hypercar at Bahrain? How did that progress? Maybe help you as a driver getting to test that car for extremely top level team.
So that was a super great opportunity that the World Endurance Championship, and the FIA graciously gifted me. It's a handful of people that get, even looked at during the year for the rookie tests in Bahrain. And I'm super grateful that, they noticed that I had done, good things that year, and they felt like I was deserving of it. Such a unique experience and a unique opportunity. Got to go to the Toyota shop before Bahrain and get on the simulator there, work with the team beforehand, see the facility, learn how they do things, make my seat. I just remember, being very impressed by this world-class operation and getting to see how this, happens. and how they make this dream a reality. Phenomenal people, phenomenal operation and team, and a once in a lifetime opportunity to drive that car. I think that's one of those cars I'll look back on, and only a really small handful of people have ever gotten to drive it, and so it's
Right.
to percentage of individuals that's even gotten to sit in it is magic for me. But to drive it and get to test it at Bahrain was something special. I'll never forget pulling out of the pits for the first time in that car, and the feeling that I had from the first 10 laps. And even though I only did I think it was 30 laps during the day, it was still such a unique experience, and to get to compare my data with the world champions from that year in the same car, the same machinery was incredible. I think that, I learned a lot from those guys and from how they operate as a team and as drivers. Super thankful for that experience and grateful to them. And I'd love to have another opportunity like that in the future, but you never know when that'll happen or if it'll come. But yeah, it was something special and for sure a lifelong memory.
And that's kind of the cool thing about your seat with IndyCar. So many of those guys do both. They run the sports cars and the open wheel stuff. So the door really never closes per se, because there's always an opportunity, whether it be full season or run just the endurance races or just the roll. Some of them just do the Rolex each year. So it kind of work. It can kind of work in your favor in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's really, the real goal would be to be full-time in IndyCar and then an endurance driver for IMSA with A team and A category for the long races. That would be, kind of the dream. The more I can race, the better. There's lots of series that I enjoy and that I'd love to give a shot at. Even outside of that, if I could go be an endurance driver for, the Aussie V8 supercars at
Oh, that'd be
Bathurst.
awesome.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
So there's lots of other series I enjoy and cars I'd love to give a shot, but I think the real dream for me is full-time in IndyCar with an endurance drive at IMSA.
And you're right there. You've already accomplished the endurance role in IMSA, so that wouldn't really be a whole new thing, though. It's just IndyCar is the next step.
Yep.
As we wrap up here, we have one more question for you. What was your off season like and being in preparation, excuse me, for 2025, and what's your expectations for 2025?
What was the last part?
And what's your expectations for next season as well?
It's been a hectic kind of last couple months for me. So I was in the process basically right after Nashville of moving to Indy. So I've left Oregon. I'm now living in Indianapolis. I fly back on Monday to Portland, but yeah, I've been on my own in Indy for I want to say 2 months now, roughly. Which for for how young I am and for the kind of scenario I'm in is very rare.
Right.
So I think college is a nice kind of leeway for most individuals to leave their family behind and to move on their own, where a lot of the time you're living in a dorm with someone else, you have a roommate, you're not really fully moved out, you still go home very frequently, but for me, I've kind of skipped that intermediate step and I'm straight by myself with all my stuff here. So it's been very hectic, but I've been spending the last couple of months every week in the gym, 5 times a week, only really taking the weekends off, going to the shop, trying to help my mechanics and doing meetings with my engineers. So it's been really hectic here. It's been hard to get used to. It's something that I've grown up in the same house for all 18 years of my life. So to be here now by myself, on my own, no pets, no nothing is a very big. I've grown up with big dogs in the house, and there's no dogs here. So yeah, it's been hard. It's been for sure a journey, and but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be taking more steps towards my goal and my dream. And I think that being here is more a testament to the fact that I'll do anything to get there. And yeah, I'm excited to head home here on Monday and see my family again and have a nice Thanksgiving dinner. But for now, it's just still focused on preparation for next year and the plans that we have, even preseason. So we're going to try and do some stuff before the season starts to get some more experience in a Formula car and in junior Formula. I'm sure there'll be some testing and if we can, some racing as well. So I'm excited for what's to start the year here, and I'm really looking forward to getting cracked on in St. Pete.
March will be here before we know it.
Very true.
Yep. Well, Josh, we'd like to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and
We
thank you
appreciate
thank you for joining us here, and thank you for doing one with us as well.
we really appreciate it. It's really awesome to get to find out more about your career and then some of the insights and it that most people may not really knew.
Yeah, of course. I'm always happy to kind of give an insight into some of the unique experiences I've had, and yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Have a good Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
and
You too. Have a Merry
Merry
Christmas
Christmas
as
too.
well.
all right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
See ya.